Welcome to the Fashion Startup. I'm Michelle Ramsey. I'm the fashion expert. And if you're thinking about starting a clothing brand, but you just don't know where to begin, then you're in exactly the right place. I've spent over 20 years in the fashion industry. I've worked on brands such as Gymshark, Topshop, ASOS, and M&S. And now I help first-time fashion founders go from raw idea to a successfully launched collection. Each episode, I'll be sharing what you actually need to know about building a clothing brand that has a real chance of working. You'll hear founder stories, advice from guest experts, and lots of guidance in my solo episodes to help you get that idea for your fashion brand off a Pinterest board and actually into the real world. If the fashion industry feels like a closed door secret club that you're not part of, then I want you to know that you're welcome here, and I'm going to lift the velvet rope and let you on the inside. In this episode of The Fashion Startup, I want to talk to you about the ideas graveyard that millions of fashion brand ideas goes to every single year, never actually make it off the Pinterest board. I'm going to talk to you about why that happens. I'm going to hopefully help shift some of the beliefs around this. And I think it's really important for me to open up this episode by saying that this is definitely not one of those episodes that you're going to listen to and it's going to talk about believe in yourself and everything's going to work out just fine. Yes, I am someone that completely encourages my clients and the people that I work with to follow their dreams and create the fashion collection they've been thinking about for years. I work with people that are going to actually build brands that are going to turn into successful businesses. And there's a huge difference there. Yes, I think there's definitely an angle of bloody mindedness needs to be involved when you're starting up any business, not just one in the fashion industry. Believe some of this cheerleading about believe in yourself and it will all work out in the end. It can actually be very misdirected if it's not surrounded by some form of plan or strategy that's going to actually help you get there. I want to set the scene here. I want you to picture yourself. It's an evening, you're on the sofa. Maybe you've got your favorite beverage in one hand. In the other hand, you've got your phone. You're adding another pin to that Pinterest board that you've been building for a year now. And you're telling yourself, oh, one day I'm going to do this. You might be watching the rise of some of these seemingly overnight internet success stories on Instagram. And you're wondering how someone creates a fashion brand so quickly. When what you're actually seeing is a highlight reel of a journey that's maybe taken someone a year or 18 months. When we're in that idea stage, when we have this in our head or we have this idea on a Pinterest board, it feels great. It feels exciting. It's a good feeling to kind of go in and pin another pin. And the reason that it feels so good at this stage is because it's all upside. There isn't any risk involved at this stage. Nobody's going to come along and tell you you're doing something wrong because you're probably not even talking about creating a fashion brand in the first place. Nothing can actually go wrong on a Pinterest board. Nothing's costing you anything just now. Nothing's being rejected. It's the nicest part of that whole journey. I want to say to you that there's no shame in staying in this dreamer phase for any amount of time. It's a nice place to be and everybody goes through it. But there's always that point in time when a shift starts to happen. And usually it's the thoughts of, well, wouldn't it be great if I actually pursued this? What would I actually need to do if I'm going to go ahead and create this clothing brand? What is actually involved in this? And this is the point that usually people go inwardly quiet on themselves and their idea. And the Pinterest board is still there. The idea is still there. It's kind of there in the background, but it's not actually going anywhere. And this is the point where people usually start telling themselves things like, I don't have any experience of doing this. I can't draw. I didn't go to fashion school. I don't have any connections in the industry. I don't know anything about manufacturing. I wouldn't know the first thing to say to a factory. Other thoughts start to creep in like, is this a crazy idea? Who am I to step into this industry that I know absolutely nothing about? People like me don't actually create brands. That's for celebrities, the people that I'm seeing online. And it's funny because when I get on discovery calls with first time founders, I hear the same apologies. And they're actually apologies that nobody has asked for. They're these self imposed apologies because all of these thoughts are going through your mind. So founders will say things to me on discovery calls like, oh, sorry, I don't really know anything about this. Or sorry, I'm not from a fashion background. Or sorry, these sketches are awful because I can't draw. And I want to bring something really, really important to your attention. And if you stop listening to this episode after this sentence, or you only take one thing away from this episode, I want it to be this. When we're talking about things that we don't know yet, so I don't know how to find a manufacturer, or I don't know how the whole process works, or I can't really draw. They're all things that are either knowledge or skills gaps. And I want you to know that everyone doesn't always know every single thing about starting a fashion brand when they first begin. All of the things that you're highlighting are knowledge or skills gaps. And they're all things that can either be learned or you can find someone who knows all of that already. None of these are an actual reflection on your ability to actually start the fashion brand. And what you're doing is you're letting these self-beliefs around these knowledge and skills gaps blur the lines between what you're thinking about yourself, and you're letting it act as almost like a verdict, a predictor on whether you can do this and whether your brand will be a success. Like it's a read on your ability or a read on your character. And those are two very different things. Something that's a knowledge gap that you can learn, utilize someone else's experience, over a limiting self-belief about whether you can do this or not. And the thing about having a knowledge gap or a skills gap is it's completely fixable. Things can be learned, or like I mentioned earlier, you can utilize the expertise of someone else that has that experience, that knowledge, that skill that you need. They're all completely fixable. But what you translate this to in your head is it's a roadblock and this is going to stop me. This is going to be something that I'm almost self-imposing and putting in my way because I know that I don't know this or I don't have this skill. And this is what I want you to recognize when you're saying things out loud to yourself. I want you to actually assess this. Like, is what I'm saying actually truthful? Am I putting something in my way? Is this something that can be learned, or I can acquire someone else's skill or knowledge to help me actually do this? Because the two are very, very separate. But actually what happens is when people create something, and most founders are building their fashion brand in a bubble, especially to begin with, when it's all at that idea stage, they're building in a bubble. And so what you do is almost create this like echo chamber where you're just saying the same things back to yourself over and over again. And it's actually where most people then start to really stall on their fashion brand, because not only does the self-doubt set in, but because we're translating these things as something different, we then believe that the answer to all of this is, well, I've just got to keep learning. I've got to learn more. I've got to enroll in a course. I've got to do something else. I've got to learn to sew. I must need to learn to draw. I need to keep researching. And then what happens is we're waiting for that moment when we wake up and we're like, oh, the time is perfect. We know everything now and we're 100% confident that we can go ahead now because we have all of our ducks in a row and we have all of that knowledge that we've been searching for. Here's the reality check. You're never going to get to that point, okay? But I also want to tell you something about the fashion industry, just to try and hit this point home a little bit more. If you're listening to this and you're not sure what areas you should be focusing on to build your fashion brand, then I've got a free quiz over at thefashionexpert.com. It'll help you figure out which stage you're at and also which areas you need to focus on. And you'll get a free tailored report at the end of it, showing you what you might need help with and how to focus on those areas next. Pause this episode now, go over to thefashionexpert.com. It'll take you 2 minutes to complete and your results are sent over to you straight away. I've worked in the fashion industry now for over 20 years. I worked for large corporates, Topshop, worked with Gymshark, French Connection, ASOS, lots of high street brands. So I have seen all aspects of the fashion industry from the inside. And what I want you to know is on the inside, everybody has a particular skill set, a particular job, a particular department that they work in. And the thread that holds this all together is a process. Granted, because we're talking about large corporates that are on much bigger scales than your smaller fashion startup brand, but the process is exactly the same. There's a process and it's the thread that keeps all of this together. Whether you're a one-person show trying to set up a one-item product-based business, or whether you're a large corporation, it just means that there are maybe dedicated teams of individuals taking care of different parts of this process. One of the things that I'm really passionate about when I work with first-time founders is lifting this velvet rope of this exclusive industry that is the fashion industry. And it's always a bit of a mystery to people, but I love actually inviting people in and seeing behind that velvet rope, like what is on the other side. And I can confidently tell you this about all of those different individuals in all of those different departments. Yes, they have an idea of what goes on in other departments, but they don't have every single skill set. They don't have every little piece of knowledge. They're following and they're falling into place with this process. People come into the fashion industry with certain skill sets and they learn on the job. They learn how the process that they're working on fits in with the next process that another team is working on, and how this fits together as a bigger picture, and what needs to happen at all of these stages for this process to move smoothly. Product development isn't sitting there thinking, I need to go and sign up for a course on marketing because I need to understand everything that the marketing team know. What they need to know is how that process flows and all of the different moving parts that build up a fashion brand and how everything slots into place. What first-time fashion founders get wrong with this is this craving to want to know every single piece of the puzzle at once. And the reason is you can't see that process laid out for you. So what you're probably doing is when you're at that stage where you're identifying that you have some knowledge gaps or skills gaps and that self-doubt kicks in, what you interpret that is, I need to learn more. And so what you do is you sit and you try and learn everything about all aspects of your business all at the same time. 6 months later, you're still there. You're either completely overwhelmed and you've parked that idea in that Pinterest graveyard that I spoke about earlier, or you're just constantly on this hamster wheel of trying to find out more, waiting to be ready, waiting to wake up that day to think, okay, I know everything now. Nobody is born knowing about that process or that sequence of starting a fashion brand. People either learn it in industry or they learn it through experience or they learn it through working with someone who can explain what that process is. But that process is 100% learnable. And when you can see that process laid out in a step-by-step format, suddenly you understand, okay, like this is where I'm at in this point of this journey. This is where I need to move to next. These are the steps that I need to take. This is what I need to focus on. This is where I need to concentrate my energy, my time, my money, to tick off X, Y, and Z to then unlock the door into the next stage of that process. And this is where I am against what I said earlier in the episode, just believe in yourself and it will all work out. Because it almost tells them that that is the missing piece, that they're not believing in themselves enough. I think bumbling through something with just a lot of self-belief, without knowing the right order of the operations, without knowing that step by step, without knowing what that process looks like. That is where a lot of first-time founders waste a lot of money and end up with a garage full of stock and an empty bank account, a lot of regret, and that only opportunity that you had, maybe financially, to actually get this up and running and off the ground, maybe then that's all wiped out because you just kind of stumbled into this without actually some step-by-step plan with this. There is real work involved in starting a fashion brand, and there is real risk involved as well, but there are ways that you can minimize that risk. And even with a lot of passion and self-belief, the real hard work and that risk, they don't actually disappear. Yeah, you can minimize those, but that's what I mean about this kind of cheerleading. I think a lot of the time it's misguided without a process behind it. You probably have sat there at some point and told yourself that you're going to start this when you feel like you know enough. Doing that research makes you feel like you're productive, and it makes you sit within this comfort zone because being on this eternal research wheel is comfortable because nothing is at stake. But I promise you that everybody that has successfully launched a fashion brand, none of them ever felt 100% ready. None of them felt like they knew every single thing before they began. The reason that it has worked is they've had the confidence to take that risk and get on that first step. But having the confidence to do that is knowing which is the first step to take, and also having that tunnel vision around you that you know that you're only concentrating on that step, that one step at a time. So if you're someone that's been doubting yourself, I want you to know that most of the time it's not that you can't do this because you're missing a qualification or specific connections in the industry. The industry can feel like a bit of a secret club that you haven't been invited to. I'm inviting you to it. I'm more than happy to lift that velvet rope and give you VIP access. But what you're missing isn't some sort of qualification. All you're missing is the process, and that process is 100% learnable. It's also 100% available to you if you choose to take it. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Fashion Startup. If you found it useful, it would mean the world to me if you could like, subscribe, and leave me a 5-star review. It only takes around 30 seconds. And before you go, if you haven't already downloaded your free Fashion Startup Launch Blueprint, then head over to thefashionexpert.com and grab yours now. It's completely free and it gives you a step-by-step guide to what's involved in starting a clothing brand.